I start with the IP management core process. So for the first step, it's really to develop the IP strategy according to what products we want to produce, we want to provide to the customer. Maybe we will identify an excellent business model, and also to develop some interesting software. And when we have a clear understanding of the strategy, and it's time to generate the portfolio of IP. And then based on the identified IP content, we have to do some management based on the administration regarding to paying the application fee or some kind of administrative fee to make sure that our IP is granted in the legal status. And at the same time, we should pay attention to the risk, to mitigate the risk regarding to not to infringing the IP rights of the third party. And with the time goes by, when we get a success in the real life, and we should do some investigation about our competitors to identify if there is any potential infringement, and also to try to enforce our own IP rights. And for sure, most of the time when we start to enforce our IP rights, most of the time the competitor will try to struggle and with attacking our own portfolios, challenging the validity. And then if we really want to keep a friendship or a kind of friendly competition environment, it's also nice to offer some license or close license with competitor, just to make the competition more sustainable, I would say. And also during all the process, and it's very important to keep the transparency on the IP investment, showing the willingness to cooperate with the other colleagues to optimize the portfolio. And at last is if regarding to the IP awareness rising, if we get a very successful story regarding to this business, it's always good to put it in the newsletter to let the success story become kind of model for the other colleagues to learn. And when our team reviewing this slide, we have some discussion, because in the reality life, this kind of process shouldn't be a linear relationship, which means some of steps can be agile to move forward or to move backwards.
Okay, so we go now to the generation of IP. So these are the sub-processes in generating a patent. So we identify the patent-related business model elements. So which features can be patented, such as the systems, the processes. Then we also process invention disclosures. These are the detailed description of the novel features that usually explain how the features are created and reproduced. So it explains the importance of the features of the inventions. Then out of the many features described in the invention disclosure forms, we determine the customer related features, those which could give more customer benefits. Then we decide on filing a patent application, or maybe more patent applications for such features. If there are a lot, then we proceed with the preparing of the patent application itself. We draft the description, the claims, and the drawings, which give the maximum protection possible for the features identified. And also those requirements accompanying a patent application, such as all the formality requirements.
In the course of IP generation, IP officer needs to find what the brand wants to communicate to public about the company or product, and how it should be reflected in visible shapes, and how that visible elements can be protected, and how what essentials they need to be protected. And then making decision about application of IP rights. Here the slide suggests the trademark application, which is the most relevant IP right for communicating the USPs to the customer. And after preparation of a trademark application, while considering all core elements are involved or included, for example, in the description, we may need improve the application or registered trademark as the business goes further. For example, by adding new classes or registering reformed or additional logos.
So as we have just heard from the colleagues, we have the IP core processes, and those again then divide into sub-processes. And those sub-processes can be further divided into workflows. And we took here as an example the workflow of maintenance decision within the IP administration sub-process. And we have here the display method of the so-called extended event-driven process chain, where you have here the description. It's a chronological job that is taking place once a year, namely the decision whether a patent should be maintained or dropped or altered. Then you have in each workflow in this form of display, you have the functions, the steps that are going to be conducted and to be done within this workflow. You have the people in charge doing it, and you have the documents that can be used to support this. So when we go through this here, the workflow of maintenance decision, we have the IP admin who updates the relevant information, then does an evaluation, an internal one, on the IP rights upon which the decision has to be made. And he will then report the patents to be dropped, in his opinion, to the product management, and the product manager will then give his opinion, and the IP manager will then create a decision template for the steering committee. The document to support this can be this said decision template, and then the steering committee will make a decision, which is here shown by the XOR operator, which means that there's only one option among these three is possible, namely, should the patent be maintained, should the patent family be restricted, or should the patent family be completely dropped. And in case it should be maintained or restricted, then we have further process steps here, and then the process just goes along by paying the maintenance fee. And if the patent is dropped, then this process is completely done and over, and the process is ended. So this method here is to show how we can display a workflow of processes and sub processes, and how we can really chop it into really small and easy to digest and to follow steps. So on this slide, we basically show that again, the processes have sub-processes, and you have always certain input here on the left side, then the process that goes along, and then you have a certain output on the right side. For example, here for the invention disclosure, you have the invention disclosure as such. You have a process for it, and then you also have at the end the output of the formal invention disclosure as it is as it is codified also.
So continuing with the trademark, and as we saw also on the sub-processes in the slide 3, we have here sub-processes with input and output, just as mentioned before by Alex for the patents. And we can here make an interesting link with the 4P process that we have seen in the first group presentation, with the fact that we, if we can highlight a key element here, is about the communication and the unique communication proposition that we can do out of the 4P process. And therefore, if we take the example of the second line here in the trademark sub-process, we have here this unique communication proposition element that will help us to, or that will be our inputs to shape the elements that we want to protect. And this should give us the direction or the intention to file our trademarks to support the brand. So yeah, maybe just to conclude on this part, this highlight the point how much trademark is oriented around what we want to communicate with the customer and the relationship we have with them.
So this slide to present the IP management process related functions to typical function in the company. So here the process manager is associated to the CTO with task of definition of the IP management process landscape, and he is also responsible, for example, of the whole IP management process. For the process owner, he is linked to the head of IP department, and his task can be to define the limits of these processes and lead the teams for creation and development process, and also monitoring and auditing. For the process leader, it can be also connected to IP manager that can plan and implement processes and also train the users of the process. For the process user, that can be associated to the IP manager, IP administrator, or service providers. They apply the IP management process. So each function in the company has a process function associated.
And here is the association of every steps of an innovation process with several tasks on the IP related management process. So, for example, for the phase of idea generation, where there is a SWOT analysis, IP would provide an IP panorama of the innovation fields that are talked about at the early stage of the innovation process. This will continue also, this prior art search will continue on phase 2 for the product planning, but also in this phase, the IP department will be involved in defining the IP strategy. During the product design and product development phase, there are actually two items. First one is looking at technical features relevant for the customer and generate thinking of ideas that could be protected. So generation of technical IP rights, and we could also look at design features that could generate non-technological IP rights. Altogether, using the patentability studies on the prior art search for the patentability studies, on the prior art search at the early beginning of the innovation process, we have a clear view of all the patents that could be dangerous for the freedom to operate. And on the last phase would be before the production and market launch would be the FTO analysis to provide a go/no-go on the market launch.